Empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. Shatter the stereotypes. Power Black men. Power Black men. Shatter the stereotypes. Power Black men to live extraordinary lives. Shatter the stereotypes. Shatter the stereotypes. Power Black men to live extraordinary lives.
Welcome to Shatter the Stereotypes, where the intention is to empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. This show is based on the simple idea that every Black man is capable of creating inner peace, dynamic health, great relationships, and financial abundance. Therefore, we provide insights and strategies to educate, motivate, and inspire Black men to reach their full potential and create the life of their dreams. So if you're ready for some high-octane motivation and inspiration that supports and empowers you to live the life you were born to live, get ready to shatter the stereotypes so you can build a life that lights you up and positively impacts the world. So now, let's shatter the stereotypes with your host, Coach Michael Taylor.
Hello and welcome to Shatter the Stereotypes, where my intention is to empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. You see, there's never been a shortage of Black male role models. There's only been a lack of exposure of those role models in mainstream media. So my intention is to showcase and highlight Black men who are doing remarkable things in the world. You see, contrary to mainstream media, it is my belief that Black men are actually thriving and experiencing unprecedented levels of success in the world today. And my goal is to showcase and highlight Black men who are blazing new trails in all segments of society. As you think about all of the challenges facing Black men today, it's easy to conclude the biggest obstacles we face are racism, discrimination, police brutality, poverty, and high incarceration rates. But I have what a lot of people might consider an unpopular opinion. I don't believe these are the greatest challenges facing Black men. It is my belief that the greatest challenge facing Black men is their unwillingness to invest in their own potential. Now, let me be clear. I am well aware of the challenges I mentioned, and I definitely don't deny they exist. Of course they do, but it is my belief that every Black man has the capacity to create an extraordinary life. And the only thing that can keep them from doing so is themselves. So what is needed are the tools and resources to support them in building the life of their dreams. My guests tonight are two incredible men who are actually providing those tools and resources to support Black men in building extraordinary lives. Their names are Omar Buckner and Dr. Gerald Hassell, if I say that right. And they are the founders and creators of the Black Man's Self-Mastery Retreat. And I absolutely love that title. So without further ado, let me welcome the men to the podcast. So hello, Omar, how are you?
I'm doing great, brother. How are you? And first off, thank you for having us.
Absolutely, man. Fired up and kicking, ready to jump into this work and talk about what you guys are doing. And next, let's just get Dr. G on the line. Hello, Dr. G, how are you?
Doing fantastic, man. Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate being here with you, my brother.
All righty. So
and that's Dr. Gerald. The G is for Gerald.
Dr. G, which is Gerald. Gotcha. And is it okay if I call you Dr. G? I like that sound.
Simple.
All right. So, guys, I got to tell you, I'm super excited to have you on the podcast because as a certified life coach, I know the power of transformation and self-mastery. And as I mentioned, I believe it is the greatest challenge facing Black men today. But before we talk about your retreat and your work, let's start off with a few icebreakers. So first of all, Dr. G, tell us where you're from.
I am from New York City. I grew up in South Bronx in Harlem and lived there a great part of my life until my early adult years. Moved to Ohio after college. Lived in Atlanta, Georgia, the DC area, but my life, my family, my upbringing took place in Harlem and in South Bronx.
All right. How about you, Omar? Where you from?
I call New Orleans and Chicago home.
Okay.
Born in Chicago, moved at an early age to New Orleans. My children, I have two young daughters, 13 and 15 years old. They live in New Orleans as well as my mother and my sister. My father is from Chicago, and he comes from a large family. So I have more family in Chicago than anywhere else. I feel at home in both of those cities. I also have lived in other places in the U.S., including Boston, Minnesota, and also I spent some time in Belize in the early 1900s. I mean, early 1990s, early 1900s, right? Yeah.
All right. So now we're going
But
to do some.
this is home. I am right now. I am in Puerto Morelos, Quintana Roo, Mexico, and this is my new home.
Gotcha. So we're going to do some sentence completion. So I'm going to start with you, Dr. G. I want you to complete these sentences. Number one, I really love to.
I really love to spend time with my children and just luxuriate in the love and affection that we both pour into each other, all of the fun and laughter that we have. My two children, I also live here in Puerto Morelos, Mexico, which is in Quintana Roo, 20 minutes from Cancun. So I live here. Me and Omar live in paradise. My children come here and spend the summer with me and then go back to school in the Atlanta area. And so I'm at the peak, the pinnacle of joy, pleasure, and ecstasy when I'm in that space with my two children who are both 16 and 17. So like, I just love that.
Nice.
Boy.
Dr. G, finish this sentence. My superpower is.
My ability to connect with people, man. You know, I'm what they would call an empath. And so my ability to connect with people is one of my superpowers.
Okay. I am proud of.
I am proud of my ability to get knocked down and get back up and it came. And I've been wearing the crown for a long time. I've been extremely resilient, disciplined, and focused, but I've had my share of ass whippings. I say every superhero has to take a super ass whipping, and my ability to take that and to get back up in the game and put the crown back on my head is something I'm extremely proud of my life, myself, and who I am. Absolutely.
Nice. Nice. Life is.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I couldn't make it up if it was in a movie, man. My life is incredible. I live in paradise. I'm in great shape, incredible health, and people that love me. Building community here in Puerto Morelos, Mexico with Omar. Out of that relationship, the genesis of the Black Man's Self-Mastery Retreat, the synergy between our creativity and intellect and experience. And so we have given birth to the Black Man's Self-Mastery Retreat. So life is beautiful.
Nice. And last but not least, one thing I'd like to change about the world is.
That's a challenging question. You know, one thing I'd like to change about the world is this focus on materialism, thinking that materialism defines who we are. We're missing the biggest point, you know, continuing to focus on things instead of focusing on investing in ourselves and the abundance and prosperity that can come out of that. So that's one thing that I would change about the world. Is.
Nice. All right, brother Omar. I really love to.
I love to connect with people. I love to connect people with others. I call myself a weaver, man, and I recognize what people are doing, and I see connections that everybody that might not be apparent to folks, and I like to build community.
Nice. My superpower is.
Again, it would be bringing people together. G talked about connecting with people. I think that's one of mine as well. But I think I have an exceptional and an extraordinary ability to recognize what might not be apparent or obvious to people, just in terms of how they may work together or how they may be able to connect on in building community specifically. And I have a way of bringing people together, making them feel welcome, and helping them create that community.
Okay. I am proud of.
I am proud of the fact that I keep getting up. Yeah, I have been knocked down. I've been in some very dark places, and I keep getting up. And on top of that, I would also say that I am proud of the fact that because of some choices I've made in life that put me in some of those dark places. In spite of those choices, I'm proud of the fact that I have relationships with my children and they're getting better.
Nice. Life is.
Life is an absolute blessing. It's an absolute blessing.
And one thing I'd like to change about the world is.
This one thing I'd like to change about the world is perspective about situations. I think that what I experience is that many people fall into this culture of complaint. And I think one of the things that G and I have in common, and one of the reasons that we connect, is that we're solution oriented. And so we look at situations, we recognize them for what they are, but we're not stuck in the problem. We're constantly looking for solutions. And for me, it is frustrating when I talk to people and all they see is what's wrong, rather than seeing opportunity. And so that's one thing I'd like to change about the world.
Okay. Now, I wrote a book titled The Cure for Onlyness, a Black Man's Guide to Joy, Passion, and Purpose. And in the book, I talk about the unique challenges that we as Black men face when we're in environments as the only people of color. And I'm certain you guys have had that experience, so I'm curious, how do you navigate those situations? And I'll start with you, Dr. G.
Yeah, I have certainly been in those type of situations, and the way that I have dealt with that is to make sure that I'm accessing information and knowledge that inspires me, that affirms who I am as a Black man and my ability to operate and function in any environment that I choose to. Looking at other men historically that have had that same experience and have succeeded and excelled in spite of the perception that might be present in those types of rooms. The other thing is to really seriously monitor my self-talk and conversation, right? To the point that even when I have been in those rooms and experiences, knowing that I was walking to that I have actually taken pictures of my ancestors and put it in my suit coat so that spiritually I am guarded and protected, and I know that I'm not alone. So in those meetings, in those situations, I could just touch my chest and feel the presence of my ancestors. So there are a couple of strategies that I have used. I wear certain crystals and certain pieces of natural jewelry that, one, has significance for me. It reminds me of something. One is a piece made by my sister. For example, this piece right here is made by my sister who loves me. So the presence of having the love, the ancestors, and consistently inspiring myself to excel in these situations. And then the other piece that is also critical and essential is staying physically fit, having the endurance, the vitality, the energy to succeed in these environments. Because oftentimes people don't succeed because they don't have the vitality and the energy that it takes to get through that. So those are some of the things that I've done.
Gotcha. Omar, how do you navigate?
Now, I'm of the generation, Brother Michael, my parents had an opportunity to send me to school with white folks. I was one of a handful of Black folks in the school. And so for me, I learned at an early age that I was as good as anybody. And so I walk into a space feeling like I belong, and feeling like, knowing that I'm competent, I'm capable, and I'm able. And so that starting point for me allows me just access to my greatness. It also, I think, to follow up on what Gerald was talking about, just understanding who I am. and thinking about my parents, my grandparents, what they've done, what they did, and what they instilled in me, just the understanding that I belong and that I am worthy is important for me. Another thing that's important is setting clear boundaries, setting clear boundaries with people and speaking my truth as well, and not being and holding people accountable, you know. And so those are some strategies that I incorporate. And I'll tell you, I work in a space quite often where I am the only person of color in the room. And I've gotten quite comfortable in that space. And I'll add this too, right? I have learned to be open-minded and to be not so judgmental and to not make assumptions about people. And so those are all ideas, skills that I carry into those situations. And I think that I leave those situations better than I enter them. And I think also people who share that type of space with me leave with a better understanding of who, well, that they recognize the humanity, I think, in us all, just by dealing with me or interacting with me. They tend to, my experience has been is that people, after leaving an environment where I've been in that situation, tend to see that we're more alike than we are different.
Gotcha. So now, man, I'd like to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself professionally. So Omar, let's start with you. Tell the audience what you do professionally.
Professionally, I am, I'm a hustler, man. I'm a hustler, right? I live in Quintana Roo and I don't want to go back to the US. So right now I am earning a living. I bring people together who might not normally be together, and we get past our obvious differences and begin to look at each other as human beings.
You froze up just a moment. So let me get you to back up just a minute and start from the beginning. Tell me again what you do.
From the beginning, and I'm going to ask for 1 second. Sometimes my fan interrupts my connection, and so turn that off, and I'll start over.
That's why we have editing, so don't worry about it.
Perfect. So yeah, I work in the area of racial healing, is what they call me. I'm a racial healing practitioner.
There you go.
And I'm contracted with a couple groups in the States to bring their staffs together to get past our obvious differences and begin to see each other as human beings. We use, I have a few partners that I work with, and we use videos, photographs, poetry, prompts to engage people in conversations that they wouldn't normally have. We call them constructive, critical, essential conversations to help us, again, get past our differences. So I do that work. And then I recently stumbled into some work, man. And it's just, and then let me not say that. I didn't stumble into this work. I have been preparing for this work for the last 30 years, my entire adult life. This retreat, I am a retreat host, and I think all of my experiences leading up to this day have prepared me to do this work. But I also am working right now. I'll be doing some work in Chicago at a high school in Chicago, working with their staff, their leadership team, students, parents, and community members to create community. Right now, they're struggling with Black and brown race issues. And so there's some differences that I've been asked to come in and help resolve. And so I'll be doing that for the next 5 months, and potentially I'll be doing similar work in Vermont. So, you know, I'm open, I'm willing, brother. What I say is this: I am no longer making plans. I'm preparing for whatever God has planned for me. So I get up every day and I work. I have some projects that I work on, and I commit to doing it 7 days a week. But because I live here and I'm not tied to that 7 day or that 5 day a week, 8.5 hour work day, I do work 7 days a week. Sometimes I might work 20 minutes a day. Other days I might work 12 hours a day. But I do have that flexibility, and I'm a creator. And so I'm creating spaces where people come together and connect and build community.
Gotcha. All right, Dr. G.
Yes, I've been working in the field of psychology since the early 80s. So my first job as a therapist was in the field was 1984, something like that, right? So I've been working in the Black community and mental health. I've been working as a psychologist for the past 25 years. I'm the author of a book called The Impact of Father Absence on African-American Boys. I've worked with men in various environments and populations, college campuses, incarceration, corporate America. I've been the administrator of large organizations in New York City and Atlanta, Georgia. But over the course of all of those times and different positions that I may have held, I've always maintained my own private practice, which I maintain now. So I'm a private practitioner, and I see clients internationally now. So I see clients in the United States, here in South America. I've had clients as far away as Asia as well. So as a coach, focusing on self-mastery, that is the platform, that is my focus. And most of the people that I work with are actually Black women. You know, I do have some Black men that are clients. When we talk about Black men investing in themselves, in my practice, I see Black women doing that consistently and constantly, right? And so, author of also The 7 Keys to Self-Mastery as well, which is a book that is going to be coming out along with the retreat in February. I have experience with retreats and with rites of passage. This is something that I've been involved with for several decades as well. I am getting involved with it again because of my love and respect and admiration for Omar and just the synergy that we have. And we see the need for it. We see the need for Black men having a sacred space to come in which they can dive deeper into self, dive deeper together as a collective to learn from each other, get back into a fresh, organic, natural environment to detox. And so I'm very excited about what we'll be presenting for the Black Men Self-Mastery Retreat. I have certainly worked different states as a consultant, as an administrator, and now I'm just happy to just be deep into my practice and showing other people how to develop their own spiritual practice so that they can heal themselves as well.
Got it. Perfect segue into the Black Man Self-Mastery Retreat. Now, your website says self-mastery is disciplining the mind and body for the purpose of spiritual growth and service to others. Expound on that just a little bit, Dr. G.
Yes, when I was placed on the pathway of self-mastery, which is about 20-something years ago, in my research, I was looking for a definition that fit self-mastery. And what I was seeing was tied to materialism. It was tied to white men who were smoking big cigars and driving big fancy cars. And that just didn't fit what self-mastery meant to me. And so in my prayer and meditation, I asked for a definition to be given to me. That definition was downloaded to me: the practice of disciplining the mind and the body for the purpose of spiritual growth and service of others. And that was my journey. Like my dark days and the difficult times that I faced, I had to enter into a practice that allowed me to discipline my mind and body so that I could apply the knowledge, the experience. It wasn't a matter of acquiring information. I didn't have to read any new books. What I needed to do was to become a practitioner of self-mastery, disciplining my mind and body. And so that's where the definition came from. It came through me. It's a spiritual definition that came through me. And to me, it's just the perfect definition.
Got it. I love it. So let's talk about something that most Black men aren't comfortable talking about, which is men's emotional baggage. Now, it's my contention that the key to self-mastery begins with healing our hearts and doing our inner work of transformation. And that means addressing any unresolved emotional conflict and trauma that we may have. So, Omar, I just want to kind of get your input on the importance of looking at and doing that inner work. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, I tell people that I take this work seriously, my personal transformation, and I take it so seriously that I had to get out of the States. Part of my story is that in the past 5 years, I've lost 100 pounds, and on October 26th, I celebrate 5 years of sobriety, drug-free, drug and alcohol-free. And so when I think about who I was, what it was like, what happened, what it's like now, for me, it's all about acknowledging, recognizing that I needed to, there were some things about me that only I could address. My mother loved me. She wanted me to change. My wife at the time wanted me to change. My children, I'm sure they wish daddy would have been a different man. All of that, it didn't matter. None of that mattered. My sisters, suggested I go to treatment. My doctor suggested that I lose weight. That did not matter until I decided it was important. And it was something that I wanted to do to change the way that I was living. And so for me, it meant that I had to look at myself, and I had to acknowledge that, yes, I come from greatness. I come from greatness, and I see that in my aunts, I see that in my uncles, I see it in my parents. And at the same time, I wasn't living up to that greatness. And so I had to look at myself and be completely honest that I was not who I wanted to be. I was not who my parents thought I would be, who my creator made me to be. I was not living up to that expectation. And that was hard because in my mind, I was a bad man. I could walk into a room and everybody loved Omar, and it's on the surface, it seemed like I was okay. But when I'm completely honest with myself, I was miserable. And until I began to take the necessary steps, the appropriate actions to create change, and to acknowledge that, first to recognize that let me say this, to acknowledge that there's a creator and that there's one greater than me whose I am and who does for me what I can't do for myself. And so to recognize that I was not in control of this thing, I am not the director, but there is an ultimate director. And for me to acknowledge that, and then just to do what I could do. And for me, I mean, and I'm talking, brother, just simple. Before I could even get to the emotional ugliness, there was some physicals. I had to just put down a fork, literally, stop eating junk food. I had to put down a crack pipe. I had to stop drinking alcohol before I could even begin to get to the inside stuff. And so that for me was a struggle, and I dealt with that for a number of years. And once I got to the point where I could see some physical change, and I could think I was living again, I could feel. And then I really got a chance. That's when it got kind of ugly because I didn't want to feel. And that's why I was doing some of the things that I was doing. So I didn't have to feel. And so I understand that now, in order to get through it, I got to go through it. I got to feel my feelings. And it might mean that, I've been in a room for a month where I didn't want to get out of bed, where I didn't get out of bed. I couldn't go to work. My boss is knocking on my door, but I'm so depressed, I can't get out of bed. I can't face the world. And so I understand that deep, that dark and ugly place where people find themselves. I was at a point where I didn't want to live. I had thought out for 6 months. I planned how I was going to kill myself. But then I realized I wanted to live. I realized that I had children that I needed to be. I wanted to be a father for. I want to see that. I want to see my grandchildren. I want to have those relationships. And so I got help, man. I got help. I recognized I couldn't do it by myself. And so I seek professional help. I joined 12-step groups. I wanted to live, and it took me getting to a place where I thought I could kill myself, and I'm just realizing I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I got to that point. I planned it for 6 months, and I got to that day, and I could not do it. So I reached out to the people who loved me. I reached out to them, and they were there. They were there for me, and it meant that I had to be vulnerable. I had to be completely honest with them, completely honest with myself, and from there, once I got to that point, once I put the shovel down, stop digging that hole, then I could really look at my situation, do a self-assessment, and then begin to take the steps that were necessary for me to become whole.
Yeah.
And it's not because I too, like most brothers, men don't cry. We don't seek help. I don't need a counselor. Crazy people seek counseling, that kind of thing. That didn't work for me. That didn't work for me.
Yeah.
So until I reached out and became willing to get help, did I see some change?
Got it. Got it. Now, Dr. G, as a therapist, I really want you to speak to this because I hear, and I've heard this a lot in my coaching practice and just the workshops I've done with Black men. And I'll hear them say something to this effect. My parents beat me when I was a kid, but I turned out okay. And they don't acknowledge the impact of that trauma, that childhood trauma. Can you talk a little bit about the impact that those types of experiences in our early years can still impact us as adults?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, those early experiences can, and they do, shape our identity and self-concept. So I experienced beatings as a child myself. So, I mean, I lived the experience. Most of us did live the experience. And so what often happens is that we become extremely emotionally constricted as a result of that. We're not experiencing the full spectrum of emotions, right? So one of the things that happens, particularly for boys, is when you're getting a beating, is that you're told not to cry, right? So we become extremely constricted in terms of expressing our emotions, right? The other thing is that we seek to avoid pain, so we learn to lie, right? In order to get out of the beating, right? We learn to lie, to be untruthful, right? We learn that you might possibly feel that you deserve the abuse because you are a bad person. You did do wrong, right? And so these things can begin to shape our identity and how we relate to the world and also how we relate to ourselves, right? And one of the most damaging effects is the generational impact, because my father more than likely received beatings and his father received them. And so we pass this on from generation to generation without ever gaining the tools to communicate effectively with our children, to teach them, right? In spite of just being on the spectrum of consequences, physical punishment, but to begin to actually have conversation, communication, and teach them and learn who they are, right? Learn who they are as human beings, who they are as spiritual beings. But most importantly, that they learn who I am as a father as well, right? That I've had my own challenges and issues and things that I've had to overcome, my vulnerability, right? So we become extremely constricted. Our self-identity can be that we deserve the punishment. We learn to be untruthful in order to escape consequences. And we can also get into a pattern of survival mechanisms that we use to survive the trauma and abuse, right? So yeah, it can have significant impact on who we are as human beings and how we see ourselves in the world.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think if we look at it from a cultural perspective in some ways, I know that collectively as Black folk, we've been so religious that, we took that spare the rod, spoil the child statement too literally. And unfortunately, I think there's still a lot of us who believe that that's the way to raise our kids. And I completely disagree with that. Because again, that trauma, the impact that the trauma has on our young people is just it. Who was it that said it's easier to raise healthy children than to repair broken men, something to that effect? And so what we're doing is we need to start healing raising healthy children. And that's another reason why I think your mastery workshop is so important, because when we learn to heal and do our inner work, we break that generational curse. We break that antiquated paradigm of this is how you raise kids. Because I know when I raised my kids, I didn't believe in spanking my kids. And I had possibly the worst childhood a person could have. I mean, every imaginable type of abuse I experienced as a kid. But fortunately for me, I chose a different path. I wanted to break that curse. I wanted to do something different. And matter of fact, I'll never forget when I was about 10 and my dad had beat me for something that I hadn't even done. But I remember we had this house that was up on cinder blocks. And I used to crawl under the house, under the stairs, and I'd play with my little Hot Wheel cars. And so I remember being under the stairs and I'm crying. And I remember the thought, I'll never forget the thought. I said, when I grow up and have kids, I'm not going to treat my kids the way my dad treats me. I remember that thought as though it were yesterday. And so, I'm sorry?
I made the same decision.
Yeah. And so it was a conscious choice. And again, I acknowledge my divine intelligence for being able to make that choice. But my point here is that as Black men, it is absolutely imperative that we understand the impact that trauma, that old spare the rod, spoil the child mentality doesn't work. And so what we end up having is just a bunch of angry kids. So we really need to start doing this work that we're talking about in this retreat, which is healing and breaking those generational curses and being willing to understand the importance of self-mastery, which is understanding who we are as human beings. Now, I want to talk. Go ahead.
From a clinical perspective, the definition of trauma is something that changes the way your brain functions. Okay. And so you have this event, it changes the way that your brain functions. So you may take a pivot and move into producing more adrenaline, cortisol, and get into a spin cycle of the fight or flight response, right? And that just continues to build. The other thing is that we know now the human brain continues to develop up until the age of 25. We didn't know that, right? So the human brain is consistently developing across the lifespan. We understand and know that through neuroplasticity, and this is what I teach my clients, is that we can actually restructure the neurological wiring in our brain, right? It's called neuroplasticity. And so trauma changes the way the brain functions, right? And that's important to understand. It's not just an emotional experience. It is a neurological experience. And it's important to bring that clinical perspective in.
Yeah. Thank you, G. G and I started this we touched on this conversation again yesterday, but I do think it's important that we acknowledge that, and I'll say this, I grew up in a household where there was domestic violence, and I knew that I did not want to treat the women in my lives the way my father treated my mother. He put his hands on my mother, and I knew that I didn't want to live like that. I think it's important. It was important for me to recognize in my own healing that my father did his best. He did his best. He came from a place, he grew up in that house where my grandfather, everybody who grew up in that house will tell you, my grandfather kicked everybody's behind. Everybody's behind. And so that's what he learned. And so it was important that I acknowledge that in terms of my personal healing, those resentments that I had against in this case, my father, I had to acknowledge that he did his best, and I had to get past that. And so, and the conversation we were having yesterday is, there were reasons why we learned some of the lessons that we learned, and they were our ancestors, our parents' ways of protecting us from the ugly outside world that we grew up in. And so I do think it's important that we acknowledge and recognize that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So we've kind of touched upon trauma and healing. And so now let's jump into the purpose of the retreat. Now, when you hear retreat, you may think, oh, we're going to go sun our buns on the beach and just sit down and drink Mai Tais and have a good time. Well, I think this is a little different. So let's talk a little bit about the content of the retreat, because again, this is just my assumption that the retreat is a place of healing. That's kind of the whole intention. Yes, it's going to be in a beautiful setting, but the whole intention, I believe, is healing. So let's just talk a little bit about that. So when we talk about healing as men, let me share just my own personal experience. So when I was 23, I was living the American dream. I had the house, the wife, the 2.5 kids and all that. And by society standards, I was pretty successful. And within about a 6.5-year time frame, that American dream turned into the American nightmare as I went through a divorce, bankruptcy, foreclosure, depression. I was actually homeless for 2 years living out of my car. And so I had to be willing to do my inner work, my inner healing. And it was a process, and it is still a process that I'm on some 30 years later. And so what we're talking about is transformation. Now, this is Michael Taylor's definition of transformation. Transformation is the process through which we transform from who we thought we were to who we were born to be. And so for me, when I hear self-mastery, that's what I hear. I hear I'm learning to become who I was born to be. And so this retreat is an opportunity for men to do that inner transformational work, to embrace self-mastery, and to understand that who they thought they were may not be who they are. And so can you talk a little bit about, man, and any man can jump in on this, but can you talk just a little bit about that process of waking up, if you will, as a result of going through your retreat? Any man can jump in.
Yeah, I mean, part of the process, and even the word retreat itself, it means that you are removing yourself from one situation and moving into another. All right. And so part of that process is giving yourself time to focus on you and to hear your inner voice. All right. It is the opportunity to be still so that you can commune, connect. All right. It's the opportunity to detox from the distraction, from the racism, from the oppression, from the depression, from the anxiety, right? To retreat from all of that. It's an opportunity to reconnect with nature. The earth vibrates at a frequency that resonates with the human spirit, and it is a part of that healing process that takes place. And so the retreat itself and the environment that we'll be in is healing, right? We're going to be in a resort in the Mayan jungle, beautiful greenery. Each young man will have his own private space with a garden outside of his accommodation. And so the opportunity to disconnect from the stress is healing in and of itself. Right? And then the opportunity to connect with other powerful men, right? Because the retreat is about power. It's about power. Healing is an effect of power. If there's no power, there's no healing. Right? So we're coming together as Black men to tap into the power within ourselves, to tap into the power of the Creator and Spirit. And in that connection, healing occurs organically. Right? It's like being realigned. Right? And that process doesn't stop. Right? 1 minute of positive thinking lasts for hours. 1 day of positive thinking lasts for months. So what we know and understand through experience is that when you attend the self-mastery retreat, the return on that investment will be exponential and generational. It would affect your ability as a man, as a father, as a husband, as a son. And there will be transformational, generational effects from attending this retreat, right? And so that's how we see this. You gain the tools of self-mastery, right? This is the tools that I've developed. I've been working with my clients and teaching them the 7 keys of self-mastery. It's a way of contextualizing, right? Because all it is just words of contextualizing life so that you can see how these things are unfolding in your life and you have some context, some blueprint for deconstructing them and putting them back together from a position of power. So this retreat is about power, right? It's about power, tapping into your power.
Yeah, and you make a really good point, because there's a misconception that as Black folk, we don't enjoy nature, right? It's like Black folks don't camp, you know, we just don't do that kind of stuff. But and I think power is a really good word, because I know that when I'm in nature, there is a power that I feel. I can't put it into words. I just feel it when I'm in that space. And so, yes, I love what you're saying there, Dr. G, in terms of you're retreating from all the external noise and all the stuff that we're bombarded with on a daily basis. And when we get into nature and connect with the authentic self, there's a connection that occurs. And this retreat, I think, is a way of connecting. And if you've never had the experience of feeling, and this is the key, feeling the reverence of life through nature, you're missing a huge part of being human, because trees and plants are healing if you allow yourself to be open to it. So with that being said, let's take a quick look at the place where you guys are going to be real quick. Let's see here.
In Puerto Morelos, Quintana Roo, Mexico. And we are, as G said, about 20 minutes south of Cancun International Airport and 25 minutes north of downtown Playa del Carmen. This particular hotel, Lunita Jungle Hotel, is 17 kilometers into the jungle. And we feel it's important that people that men get a chance to see this environment, because we have all these ideas about what it means to be in the jungle. People might think we're sleeping in tree houses, but as you see, it's a quick video that I don't know if it's a luxury accommodation, but it's one that's we expect men to really be able to come and relax and do that connecting with nature, as you both described.
Got it.
Double room occupancy spots. So the rooms will be just as you saw them on that video for the single room occupancy. And then for the double occupancy, we're going to move 2 smaller beds in, and men will be able to share that space. But one thing we absolutely want to mention is that every room is air conditioned, which is important. And then every room also has its own private restroom facilities.
Nice. So again,
Yeah.
I can't emphasize enough the importance of healing environments, because these men are going to create a safe space for you to do your work, to do your inner transformational work. But being in that environment that is so beautiful, that is so connected to nature, again, just being there, I can assure you, will be healing. And another point I want to make is the importance of facilitators who look like you. Facilitators who look like you, and the safety that comes from being in an environment with men who look like you, who are committed to the same thing, and creating that safe space. So real quickly, men, as we start to wind down, Doctor, you just kind of talk about the importance of that safe space that the men will come to.
Yeah, absolutely. Both Omar and I are experienced facilitators, and as a psychologist, that's the work that I do. I create a safe space where people can come and expose themselves, right, and open up. And so, what me and Omar have done is created this sacred space. And as you pointed out, Michael, by having facilitators who look like you, who have life experience like you, who are deeply invested in your well-being. This is something that really not only do we need, but we thirst for it, right? Black men who thirst for getting together with other powerful Black men that they can learn from and be open, honest, and transparent with each other, right? And so by doing that, man, under the sun, the moon, and the stars, and the energy that's going to be present, having access to the Caribbean Ocean, we're 20 minutes away from the ocean. So we'll spend a day on the beach. Each man will receive a full body massage, right? From a masseuse. And so it's all meant to focus on you, the Black man, your healing, your strength, your power. And so it's an experience that just by us coming together with the intention and the expectation of greatness, we will achieve that outcome in and of itself. I've seen it too many times to think anything other than that.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I'd like to add that G and I are convening the retreat, and G will be the primary facilitator during the 5-day experience. We also have identified Black men from this area and from the U.S. who will also be leading different elements of the retreat. And at the same time, we're looking to introduce a feminine energy into the space as well. And so we expect this to be, again, just a powerful experience that men can walk away and return home as better men, better husbands, brothers, parents, fathers, cousins. And so we're just excited about this experience.
yeah. And one thing that I mentioned earlier, as Black men, again, I think one of the greatest challenges we have is our willingness to invest in our own potential. And so it amazes me sometimes when I look at, and I'm not going to pick on the brothers, but we spend tons of money on stuff, external stuff. Dr. G, you kind of talked about materialism at the beginning. But if you think about it, when you purchase that stuff, there's not a lot of long-term return on investment. It might be cool for a couple of days. You buy that new car, you get that new car smell, it feels good, you show it off to your friends, and then a couple of weeks, it's just a car. Transformation, on the other hand, when we make that investment in ourselves, and again, Dr. G kind of talked about it, we're talking generational return on investment by how we handle our relationships, which helps our family. I mean, it's you can't put a price on it. You can't put a price on inner peace. Again, so after my divorce, man, I was so depressed. Omar, like yourself, man, I was thinking about ways to check out. I didn't know what to do. I was just in that really dark place, and I know what that feels like. But I also know what it feels like to come out of that darkness and to be connected to my authentic self. And it was not easy. Okay, this takes effort. That's why we call it the work. But I can assure you there is nothing that gives a greater return on investment than investing in your own potential. And this self-mastery workshop, retreat, whatever you want to call it, this self is, I agree. I think Black men are hungry for this. A lot of us don't even know these things exist. Because I know when I first started this, I was accused of hanging out with white folks. You know, what are you doing with the white people? What are you doing? What are you doing over there? What are you doing talking about emotions, right? But I believe, and Dr. D, real quick, I want to kind of go back because you've been doing this for a while. And so again, I'm an optimist, and the lens through which I see the world is pretty optimistic. And I see an awakening for Black men, that they're starting to kind of wake up. Can you speak to that? I mean, again, you've been doing this for 25 years. So can you kind of touch on that a little bit?
Absolutely. When you say the wake up, the awakening is spiritual.
Absolutely.
It's spiritual. Absolutely. It is time, right? So one of the things that has been revealed to me spiritually as a result of working on this retreat, because Omar and I, we see Black women going to retreats all the time, right? We know Black women that host retreats for Black women, right? And so spiritually, one of the things that is essential is that Black men also do the work, so that as Black women do the work and as we do the work, we can be equally bonded, right? So we're going into 2024, which is the number 8, right? 8 is symbolic for correspondence. As above, so below, masculine, feminine, sun, moon, right? One cannot exist without the other. So the work that we're doing with this retreat is a part of the spiritual ascension for Black men so that they can be better husbands and fathers, because Black women are doing the work. There are more Black women on college campuses now. There are more Black women attending retreats. And so this work is a part of making a contribution to the elevation and to the ascension of Black men, because the feminine is assuming her rightful place back on the throne, right? European, Western society, religion has taken her off of the throne. And it's been that way for almost 2,000 years. The correction that has taken place, she's now assuming her rightful place back on the throne. We see this through consciousness around the work, consciousness around the earth and Mother Nature and how it's being treated, consciousness around plant medicine, that the earth has the cure for all of the things that are the illnesses that we're experiencing mentally, physically, and emotionally. And so the work that Omar and I are doing is a part of this correction, balancing the scales. We can't have Black women continue to ascend spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and financially, because they are making the investment and receiving exponential growth and results. Black men got to balance that scale. We got to also ascend as well.
Yeah, and again, that's when I think about the challenges in our community. You know, obviously they throw up poverty, and we know all the challenges, but one of the challenges that we have is this whole dynamic about relationships and how we as Black men have to do our healing work in order to create true intimacy and connection in our relationships. Because there's this idea, and a lot of it is perpetuated by what we see in the media, rap videos and all this, that, you know, Black men disrespect women. Well, we've got to change that narrative ourselves. And how do we change that narrative? Is by us men doing our healing work so that we can create authentic relationships, so that we can create the connections with the women who are doing this work, right? So that's why I think this retreat and the work that we're talking about is so important, because again, I believe Black men are thriving. I know the challenges are, but I still say we're thriving and we are waking up. And Dr. G, I love what you said about spiritual, because we're not talking religion, right? So we're not talking about organized dogma and doctrine, the Bible said. No, we're talking about spirituality, essence of who and what you are as a human being. And that's what self-mastery is about. It's about you connecting to that part of yourself, that self. And I like to think of it this way. We have what I call the little s self and the big S self. The little s self, some people may refer to ego, but the big S self is your divinity. It is your connection to that which created this whole universe. Again, this is just my belief, but as Black men, we have to move away from the religious narratives, move into the spiritual narratives that connects us and allows us to achieve self-mastery. And we have to have the tools to do that. And the tools come from participating in events like this. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, you talked about brothers craving, and I agree. And this is a conversation that G and I have as well. And one of the things that I learned at an early age is that it's practice. It's all practice. You know, you don't graduate from medical school. When you graduate, you don't know how to be you're not a doctor. You know, you got to do a residency. You got to do an internship. You know, you be clueless. You finish law school. You got to practice law. And so we feel that this is, and Gerald talks a lot about his practice. And we had a chance to spend some time together. And we spent 3 weeks together in Columbia. Not Columbia, on the south of the border, right? And so I got a chance to witness his practice. I say it all the time that G is my big brother. He's my role model. He's my therapist. And I want to be like him when I grow up. I got a chance to see that it's a daily practice. And I understand that in my life, just in some of the transition and transformation that I made, you described and defined transformation as moving from the person that we are to the person that we were born to be. The language I like to use is, I see myself as who I am, who I say I am, and then who I want to be. And so, you know, they're not always the same person, but the more I practice, the more I get up and do the things that I know are necessary for me to become who I want to be, the closer I get. And those three very different people begin to get closer. And so we acknowledge that brothers crave this. We know that brothers have the money to spend on it. We see the pictures. We know brothers take vacations, extravagant vacations. They're doing the yacht cruises. They're doing the all-white parties. They're coming back with expensive cigars and expensive bottles of wine and champagne. And so we are encouraging, and we know, we've heard from brothers, we've heard from sisters and brothers who understand the importance of this work and who are willing to make this investment. And so we believe wholeheartedly that we will fill the spaces. We have 14 spots, so it's going to be an intimate environment of 14 men who come together and develop deep bonds. And we're expecting lasting relationships to come from this retreat. And then we also expect this message to spread by word of mouth. And this is going to become something that men stand in line for, and that they recognize the value of this, and that they crave, and that they share with their brothers and their co-workers, their fraternity brothers, and that and this becomes a movement.
Yeah. Now, one thing I want to talk about real quickly is something that I'm a huge advocate of, which is meditation. And I remember growing up in the Baptist church, and meditation was trafficking with the devil. I remember the minister said, boy, you can't do that, right? Well, as someone who's been meditating for more than 30 years, it's probably the most important tool in my toolkit. Again, and I'm just speaking from own experience. So, man, I'm wondering just your opinion or your feedback on the importance of that practice, that meditation practice. Dr. G, jump in there real quick. What do you got?
Yeah, I mean, one, scientifically, there is a large body of research that shows that meditation has significant health and emotional benefits. Lowers blood pressure, lowers anxiety, can help you cope with depression and come out of depression, right? People who meditate have longer lives, right? So like children, who practice meditation are better behaved in school. Inmates, there's studies where meditation has been taught to inmates in prison. They're less violent, right? So scientifically, we know that meditation works. I think for myself, in my experience, and I have decades in meditation, is that the way that you move through that is to understand that there is no structured, correct school of thought and way to do this. A lot of people get into things that they read and see, and they think that they have to go about it a certain way, right? And so, like, it's become commercialized, right? So really, meditation is just relaxing, becoming mindful and thoughtful, right? Beginning to regulate your body in a state of relaxation and becoming conscious and aware of the thoughts and seeing that those thoughts are not you, right? And that you can become the observer, right? And so for me, and my meditation has evolved to the point where I seek to stay in my meditation 24 hours a day. Like, it's not something that I leave. And when I'm distracted, I welcome the distractions, because that is how I practice refocusing, right? So, this whole thing where you have to sit down and cross your legs and your fingers and thumbs and all of that kind of stuff, like, that's not how the way life really is, and particularly in the Western world, right? Like, we need to be mindful, thoughtful, and observant of our thoughts, and to see whether or not they're serving us or not. Reducing stress, taking full breaths, right? Relaxing the muscle and tension in our body. And as we get into that practice, we can learn to move through our day and our lives through that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, Omar.
I'd just like to add, I like to think of prayer as talking to God, the Most High, the Creator, the Spirit, and meditation is listening to God, the Creator. We recognize the value of meditation so much that we're going to start every day. Each of our days, we will begin with a minimum of 20-minute meditation that's going to be led by a brother here who lives here in Puerto Morelos. He's from the States. He's also a therapist, and the meditation is his thing. So he's going to lead us each day in a 20-minute session, because we do absolutely recognize, each of us start our day, and G lives in that state, but we each have a meditation practice that we begin our day with, and it looks completely different.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, there's this misconception, I think, that meditation is you're trying to get your mind to go blank. That's not possible. You can't get your mind to go blank. And this is how I see it. Meditation is the practice. The result is mindfulness. So if I practice meditation and become aware, and Dr. G kind of touched on it, if I become aware of what I'm thinking, right? And I realize that I am the source of those thoughts. I'm not that thought. I'm just the source of those thoughts. Then I can actually change those thoughts. And so by changing my thoughts, I can change how I feel. I can change my reaction. I can change a lot of aspects but I first have to have the awareness of what's going on in my mind. And so I used to be that guy that my mind would race so much that I'd get what I call thought headaches. And I remember writing in my journal one day, I wish I could turn my mind off, because everything was just worry, or just my mind was just racing all the time. And again, after more than 30 years of meditation, I'm with you, Dr. G. It's like, I can be on stage in front of 5,000 people talking, and I can be meditating. Because it's just about the awareness, right? So again, if you have not tried it, if you do nothing else, there's no right or wrong way. You just have to commit to the practice. Yeah. You have to commit to the practice.
I took up free diving since I've been here in Puerto Morelos, right? So free diving is where you go down and you don't have the tank and all of that. You go down and you hold your breath, right? So I've gone down 35 feet on a breath of air, right? And I go into a meditative state while I'm down there. That's what I'm seeking to practice, to still my mind, right? To relax my body, the tension, to be present, to be in flow, right? And so this has helped to take my meditation to another level, right? Because I'm doing it in a totally different dimension, right? And so it's the same whether or not I'm 35 feet under the water or whether or not I'm walking down the street with Omar and we just kicking it. It's to be mindful and thoughtful, right? And to be relaxed, right? That doesn't mean that the warrior doesn't come out when it needs to. Like we need to get down. We got to get down, right? There's a time for that. But to live on the practice field rather than living on the battlefield, right? I teach my clients to live on the practice field. Everything is practice, right? And not on the battlefield, right?
Yeah. So with that being said, another point I want to make real quickly is the whole idea. Unfortunately, this is a fact. Black men lead the nation in most health-related illnesses and death. That's a fact. So what are they going to learn in the retreat about taking care of their physical bodies?
One, that it is possible. I think that one of the things that we have purchased completely is this whole thing about age, right? And that at a certain age that the body begins to deteriorate and that you're supposed to look a certain way. Like I'm telling you, listen, I'll be 69 in a couple of days, right? I'm strong, healthy, vital, and I've always been that way, right? So one is that you will see other men who are taking care of themselves, right? Two, you will have exposure to organic food, healthy food, that would allow you to make a distinction between, wow, my taste buds are being awakened, they're being energized, this is great, right? And so you'll have 5 days of eating healthy food as well, right? And then the other is in self-mastery, the definition. The first thing is the practice, right? Where we begin to focus on the practice of disciplining the mind and body. The body is dealing with health, nutrition, diet, fitness, right? Because the game that we're playing is longevity, all of us. And self-mastery is not to master the external world, it's to master the trillions of cells in your body, right? Like you talked about your thoughts, right? That affects the trillions of cells in your body, cancer, diabetes, right? And so when we talk about self-mastery, we're not talking about like, yo, just go out here and master the external world. We're talking about how do you master the trillions of cells in your body so that they're filled with light, love, compassion, and kindness, so that they regenerate healthy, productive cells, right? This is what we must master, right? And then the rest of it takes care of itself. You know, the rest of it takes care of itself. But the other thing is this, right quick, is the masses do not get this. They never have and they never will. There is a population of Black men that are thriving because they make the investment on themselves. It's been that way since we came here, right? And so for the Black men who are listening and to the women who are listening, if you want to break away from the beaten path, break away from the masses, move into self-mastery and happiness, joy, peace, health, vitality, invest in yourself. And because the masses, this is not something that the masses, it's not built that way, right? So I think that's important to understand. Right?
Yeah,
There are many.
Sorry, I do too, Gene. I think the other thing that, Brother Michael, you mentioned this, you introduced this question using numbers that are based in the US. One of the things that we think men will get from this experience is that a broader perspective. We hope that we have men from the Caribbean, from Central and South America join us on this retreat. And who can challenge those numbers, who can show that there is another way of doing things. There are different ways of doing, thinking, and being. that exist outside of the boundary of those 50 states that we've been so conditioned to think that that's the end all be all. And so just the exposure, we think, is just in itself a tremendous value that men will walk away feeling and knowing that there are other ways of doing it.
Yeah. Now, final point that I very seldom, if ever, hear Black men talking about, which is self-love. I believe that, I'm sorry?
Me and Omar was talking about that today.
Yeah, self-love. And when you think about self-love, if you're thinking in terms of arrogance or ego, no, self-love is the ability to know who you are and to love all aspects of that. So in terms of your self-mastery retreat, I believe that when we do this work and we get to that place of self-love, we take better care of ourselves, relationships work better, we're more productive at work, and we're definitely a lot happier. So final thoughts, Omar, we'll start with you. Final thoughts on self-love and the importance of self-love.
That's where it starts. I mean, that is the start. I can't love anybody else until I love myself. You know, I can give people grace. I'm gentle with people. I'm kind. I'm generous with people. But until I can show those same qualities to myself, until I can treat myself in that same manner, then I'm just not as good. I think about my relationship with my children. I understand clearly that in order for me to be the best parent that I can be, I got to love Omar. I got to prioritize loving me before I can love my children. And you know, I mean, those are my two most favorite people in the world. But I understand that unless I'm loving myself, I'm no good to them. And so for me, that's where it starts. I mean, every single day, every single morning, I wake up at a gratitude practice, where on my best mornings, I'm writing down what I'm grateful for. I don't always do that. And then I close out every day. Every single day is you know, I do a self inventory. How was I today? How did I treat people? How did I treat myself today? And for me, those are important practices. How I start my day, how I end my day. But the focus is always on me. You know, that's where I started, and then it extends to my network, the people whose lives I touch and who I love and who I know love me. But I understand, because of my life experiences, that I have to love myself first, and even if it means distancing myself from people that I love, that, you know, I have to protect myself. I have to protect Omar. And I say all the time, right? And I've been here long enough where I'm using kilos. I'm 79 kilos. That's all I can control. This is all I can control. Anything beyond that is beyond my control. And so I can master this, but I can't master anybody else's. I can love them, I can support them, I can pray for them. But this, I can master this 72 kilo. And it begins with me loving myself. And it ends with me loving myself.
Got you. Dr. G, what's your thoughts on self-love?
How do you achieve it? All right, because I work with my clients on this a great deal. All right, and so one of the ways, the essential way, is to upgrade the language that is programming the operating system. Right. So, for example, depression, anxiety, trauma has a specific vocabulary. And self-love, kindness, compassion has a totally different vocabulary. And so part of the work that we have to do is to upgrade the language and the vocabulary that's operating the system. And so what I've done for myself and what I do with my clients is to coach them to have kindness, compassion, and gentleness in the way that they speak to themselves. because we say things to ourselves that if somebody else said it to us, we would be in a fight, right? And so it's important to recognize that private conversation. How are you speaking to yourself? How are you referring to yourself? And what is the neurochemical response as a result of those words, right? I can say certain words that can produce feelings in my stomach within a matter of seconds, right? And so then we go back to the trillions, right? What language, what vocabulary are they responding to? Are they being filled with compassion, kindness, and gentleness so they regenerate cells that are vital, healthy, and strong? Or are they being re-traumatized through the internal conversation where you're punishing yourself, you're putting yourself down, you're degrading yourself, you're not good enough, right? Which produces disharmony and dis-ease in the body and in the cells, right? So how do we achieve self-love? One is that we really have to examine that self-conversation. We have to extract the words and the vocabulary that are depleting our energy, degenerating ourselves, and begin to practice religiously, consistently, a totally different vocabulary, right? I'm incredible, remarkable, powerful, beautiful, unstoppable, resilient, resistant, right? Being able to go off on complete rants of positive energy and vibration that the cells respond to, right? And this becomes the key to longevity, right? And the key to self-love, because love has a vocabulary and so does hate. They're totally different.
Yeah. And so we live in a society that promotes this idea of instant gratification and quick fixes. Folks, this is a process. So if you want to transform, if you want to get to that place of self-love, it doesn't just happen overnight, right? It's a process that you engage in through your lifetime. But again, it starts with you having the tools of awareness to practice. So this retreat is an opportunity to provide you with some tools so that you can practice, so that you can get good at becoming you. That's what self-mastery is about. Becoming good at becoming you. So men, now let's talk about the dates. When's the dates? When's the retreat? So anybody can jump in and tell us when it is.
We're going to convene on February 14th, 2014. 5 days in the jungle.
What's back up? 2000 what?
2024.
Thank you.
2024, February 14th through February 19th, 2024, in Quintana Roo, Mexico. Puerto Morelos is the town we'll be in. 17 kilometers into the jungle, only 20 minutes away from the sea. So those are the times, and we will provide. You have access to the website and the information, but it's pay one price. Once you're here, you don't have to spend any money to get here. We will cover the cost of the retreat covers your housing, all of your expenses as it relates to food, drinks, massage. We have cenote excursions. We have a cacao ceremony planned, as well as a sound bath ceremony. A day at the beach where we'll spend the day at a restaurant, we haven't actually confirmed the location, but we're considering a restaurant resort where we will have access to all the amenities at the facility, and that will all be covered in one price. And so February 14th through the 19th, 2024.
Now, you also have a program for, go ahead, Dr.
You can make payments on the price too. So.
Absolutely.
Installments.
You also have a GoFundMe program with some scholarships. Tell us a little bit about that for the men who may be saying, I'd really love to come, but. So talk a little bit about that.
Gene, why don't you talk about that?
We have a GoFundMe scholarship where we are planning to have 4 men between the ages of 18 to 23, where they will receive a full scholarship to attend the retreat. Their flight, everything coming. The only thing that they will have to do is to get a passport, right? And so these 4 men between the age of 18 and 23 will attend the retreat totally free. We know that it's important to bridge that generational gap. We need to have young men in the fold, in the circle, being a part of the conversation. And so the GoFundMe is something that we're doing we're asking for the communities to help us and to support this effort to bring forward just 4 lucky young men to come to this retreat, right? And so that GoFundMe campaign is going on right now. Totally all expenses paid.
And so if you can attend the retreat, but yet you still want to support these men in the work that they're doing, it's a great opportunity to help other brothers get into this retreat so they can achieve self-mastery. Now, there will be a link below the video for the GoFundMe. There'll also be a link below the video for the actual retreat information. Is there any other information you may need to share about the retreat?
Yes. If Brother Michael, if you could also share the link to the information, the Zoom link for our informational sessions, which we will offer from tomorrow, which is the 22nd of August, and we'll do those the 3rd Thursday of each month. We'll gather, we're going to convene via Zoom, where we've set out 45 minutes starting at 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time to go through a 20-minute presentation about what you can expect from the retreat, and then to answer any questions that you might have about the retreat. And again, that's the 3rd Thursday of every month, tomorrow, which is August the 22nd, from 6:30 to 7:15 Central Standard Time, and the link will be below. It'll be, the link does change, but if you follow us on Instagram and also Facebook at the name of it, which we haven't mentioned, the name of the retreat is the Black Man Self-Mastery Retreat. The organization that we've created is Self-Mastery Retreats International, because this is not a one-time event. This is something that we are committed to, building this community of men who are on this journey of self-mastery, and we're going to do this through a series of retreats. And we've set up the social media, and it's all Self-Mastery Retreats International. You can find us on Twitter and Facebook. Okay. No, I'm sorry, not Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. Instagram and Facebook. And it's Self-Mastery Retreats International.
Okay, now you mentioned Thursday, but then you said the 22nd. The 22nd.
Tuesday, I'm sorry, it's Tuesday.
Okay,
so it's the 3rd Tuesday of each month.
3rd Tuesday, okay. Third Tuesday of each month starting tomorrow.
Yes, well, this will be our 3rd one, but yes, tomorrow we're going to convene.
Okay, got it. All right, gentlemen. So now, as we wind down, I'd like to give you an opportunity for your closing thoughts, whatever you'd like to share with the audience in regards to what we've discussed, or anything that's on your heart. So, Omar, let's start with you.
Brother Mike, I just want to start with you, man. As you introduced this segment, it was really encouraging to hear you talk about your commitment to our community, and then your support of our project. And for me, that energy and that spirit is just so inspiring and so necessary. You know, you asked both of us the question about if we could change one thing about the world, what would it be? Probably second for me would be this idea of competition. You know, so I'm all about community building, collaborating, and so to meet you, and we're just getting to know each other. But to feel this love, and there's nothing less than love of us as individuals, of the work that we're doing, of our community. I am so grateful, and I'm encouraged by that. And lastly, just family, spread the word, talk to the men in your lives about this work, about the importance of investing in themselves. Consider contributing to our GoFundMe. This is about, we talk about changing behaviors, changing mindsets. And we know that, older men, more mature men, we still are not investing or don't invest in ourselves as we should. It's not a priority. And so we want to teach young men that this is something that's important, and it's a way of life. And so we want them to develop this practice early on, because what we know is that it's contagious, and that if their friends see them, it's not about promotion, but it's about attraction. You know, if I see you thriving, I want to be like that. And so, as I said earlier, I see what G does. I know if I want to be like G, I got to do the things that he does. And so that's how this message expands. And so we just encourage you to get behind us, share on your social media all of our information, because this is something that we're committed to. We're going to fill these 14 spots. Hopefully, not hopefully, we will fill these 14 spots in the next few months, but then we will begin planning the second retreat. And so we appreciate everyone's support, and we look forward to building this community.
Now, are you primarily going to focus on having your retreats in Mexico, or are you thinking about bringing something to the States?
We are open. We are open to meeting men where there are. One of the things that we have talked about is bringing men to Palenque, Colombia, which is a place that we visited together, and it is often described as the first free settlement for Africans in the Americas. And our experience there was so welcoming and so warm, and I mean, just filled with so much love, that it's something that we want to share with other men. And so, and what's something that is important to G and I is that we introduce men to the idea that there's life beyond the 50 states. And so we do want to look at other areas. We've been invited to talk about hosting potential retreats in San Miguel de Allende, which is in central Mexico, also in Tulum, which is in southern Mexico, right near the border with Belize. And so we are open. We are absolutely open to working within the boundaries of the U.S. as well as outside of the boundaries. And I'll say this personally, Brother Michael, I do work in the U.S. now. I actually like the distance. I get to work virtually. But for me, and for my personal well-being, when I prioritize myself, I know I have to get there and get out. It's just the level of stress and anxiety that's produced when I'm in the States. It's more than I'm willing to deal with. I've set some boundaries for myself, and I'm pretty much at 5 to 7 days, and I got to get out of there.
Gotcha. Dr. G.
Yeah, there is a man that is listening to this video, and you are seeking. You've been asking for something that will help you to ascend to another level of excellence, right? You're looking for answers. You're looking to connect with other men who you feel that are like you, right? You're not listening to this by coincidence. It's meant for you. And so I hope that you will take a look at the website, the page, examine it, look at it, see how it resonates with your spirit and your soul. Also, to see how you resonate with the faces on the screen that look exactly like you. And each of us have invested time, energy, and money in our growth, right? There are some men who are listening to this that are part of corporate America. And they may be looking to take their career to the next level, or they're looking to just get away from corporate America, to decompress, to get back to who they are because they feel they may have lost themselves, right? There's a man who wants to feel more committed, more in love with his wife, right? You're here, you're listening to this, and it's not by coincidence, right? I encourage you to take a look at what we're offering. This is a sacred space designed by Black men for Black men. And so I encourage you to take that next step. And certainly feel free to reach out to us and communicate and ask any questions, right?
Got it. Well, I launched this platform as a resource to empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. And I'm always looking for brothers who are on that same journey. And I'm so glad, men, that we've been introduced. And Dr. G, you just nailed it. Nothing happens by accident, right? So we've been brought together by divine appointment. to share this work. And again, as Omar said, and I've said, I believe Black men are hungry for this work. I think they just need to be exposed to it. But again, it's challenging work, and not everybody's up to it, and that's okay. But if you're watching this video right now, you're up to it. You're up to it. So if something moves in you and this resonates with you, simple, sign up. There's going to be a link below. Jump right in, engage in this process called self-mastery, because that's what it is. It's a process. So jump into the process of self-mastery, because again, I believe the return on investment is immeasurable. You can't put a price tag on inner peace, joy, passion, great relationships. You can't put a price on that. So once again, remember what Public Enemy said. When it comes to Black men, don't believe the hype. The media is going to tell you that Black men are, we're on the decline and we're on the verge of extinction. BS. That's bullshit. We are thriving. And if we want to continue to thrive, we must invest in ourselves. We can no longer look outside of ourselves. We know the challenges. We know that. But now we got to look within. I love, one of my favorite quotes is, if you don't go within, you'll always go without. So listen to your own heart. Trust yourself. If this feels right for you, we'll see you at the retreat. So, men, again, I love you both. I'm so glad we've connected. And like I said, this is just the beginning, guys. This is just the beginning. So I'm really looking forward to see what the universe has in store for us. So once again, this has been another episode of Shatter the Stereotypes. So remember, you have the capacity. You have the capacity to create an extraordinary life. But to do so, you've got to put forth extraordinary effort. We'll see you next episode. Take care.